Hey everybody, Edo here, and for this week's League video, I went to the interweb to try and look for topics, and I was on the Tabletop Games Kickstarter forum on Facebook and said, hey, what do you want to hear about? And one of the things that came up, actually from a good friend of mine, Keith Mateka, was asking about how to deal with audiences mid-campaign and backers, and also sort of like drama, because he had just moved through his role player second expansion campaign and had a fair share of things that he had to manage. It got a little Arctic or Antarctic, I don't know, man. Anyway, so he was asking about that, and many people ask about it, and it's super tough. So, you know, especially, it gets better to a degree as you do more Kickstarters, though at the same time, if you're doing more Kickstarters, oftentimes you're doing better, and the Kickstarters are getting bigger, and the audience are getting bigger, and so the number of people who are interested, engaged, and providing feedback is going up. And also with more recognition and awareness, the scope of the world outside of your Kickstarter is growing, so it gets a lot of attention. But how you manage your community and your audience on Kickstarter is super important, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it and give some tips and tricks, I guess. But, I mean, it's really something you should be thinking about and managing through. So, when you're running your first campaign ever, you are going to be just totally enraptured with everything. Enraptured? I don't know. Totally, like, it's engrossed. It's like it becomes your life. It is a huge, monumental effort and roller coaster ride, and you're like super in it. And it's very common in that first campaign for you to be hyper responsive and like anytime anyone makes any comment, you're like, what am I supposed to do? Do I respond? Don't I respond? That person, what? You know, like it like grabs you so tight and so hard. That does ease up as you know how to do it, but it's still, even at 10, 12, 13 campaigns in, something you have to grapple with. And it's been interesting for me, actually, because since I do projects with, like, Heroes Welcome was with Mark, and it was his first campaign ever, and that one was actually under Monkey Jump and I was a contributor, but, you know, other campaigns you're working with different designers, some of which have more experience on Kickstarter, others which don't, or artists. I've had the opportunity as late to like viscerally live through a campaign where other people involved were like much more reactive than I was, and like it just reminded me of how I used to feel. So let's get to some tips and tricks. First and foremost, the best way you can deal with, address, and manage community is by engaging with and managing the community. I mean, different people have different techniques, but like for sure, the version of it where you ignore the community is a rough road. Some people do it, and you know, I mean, you see it in small campaigns that sometimes flounder, get little community management, and then other campaigns where they're so big that, you know, they just like, not that they don't care, but like when you have 10,000 backers, you're like, whatever. Sort of hit it. But for the most part, in the middle, where most people are, you need to engage with your community. Like, kill them with kindness is a great little phrase. Like, just always be responsive and positive and thoughtful. To the extent you can, be transparent. I'll talk about that a little bit. But just try your best, and it's always hard, to avoid running down rabbit holes and getting into fights. It's important to remember that you're in this little microcosm of your comment section, but you are on the internet. This is internet social. This is internet commentary. So if you just have to always say, like, one, I probably don't want to say the first thing that comes to my mind. But more importantly than that, anything I say is public. Anything I say can be shared. You need to understand that you can't have a private conversation on Kickstarter. Like a good example of this, which is sort of not community, but like when you're running a Kickstarter, you're going to get approached by all these different companies and people and saying, hey, like it happens, it used to happen to me all the time. It's still like some Spanish retailer or backer says, hey, I want to do a 10 backing pledge. Can you do it? Can you give me a deal? And you're like, sure, I'll give you this deal. And maybe you say $50 a copy. Then later, somebody else is like, hey, this, and they're like really persuasive, or you go and like, for whatever reason, you're like, fine, $49 a copy because you like argued with me 3 more times. Like in some world of a vacuum, that's 2 different conversations that don't overlap. But without fail, what'll happen is they'll be on some forum on the internet, they'll both talk, see that they have different prices, and then they will both come back angry at you, or probably the one who's paying $1 more. And like being consistent on the internet and understanding that like whether or not you're like, I guess the important part is even though you might be in a private channel on your end or on a community that comments that are backers only or whatever, like any of those people can take that information you've shared directly, screenshot it, type it out, share it, push it in a forum, and instantly pull it all into the public view. Like you do not control any information on the internet ever, 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 right? Ever. And so, like, just know that if you tell one thing, like, just assume everything you tell to any singular person, you are telling to everyone. Now, there are points in which you want to move conversations out of the limelight, but even if you're moving it out of the limelight, don't think it's private. Don't think it's private. It's not private, okay? So you have your audience, they're talking, everyone's doing their things. It is very valuable before things are bad, before somebody has a problem, before somebody doesn't like a stretch goal of yours or a vote or demands sleeves, right? Whatever. Before you go down there, engage the community, be positive, because your best, biggest, most incredible ally are people who support and believe you and engage with you in the comments on your page. Let me be clear. You're running a Kickstarter. I'm sure lots of people care about you. Lots of people support you. But they don't mean anything if they're not people who engage in the comment section as far as dealing with this issue is and dealing with comments and audience, right? Like, those people exist and they're wonderful and you can support them, and every once in a while you might like call them in. But what you rather is there is this other group of people who are really engaged and like commenting and participating in the comment section. You want to have avatars, you want to have supporters, you want to have people who engage with you from that group. And the way that group operates is you want to engage and listen and respond and consider their feedback and make them feel like they're part of the process. The more they feel like they're part of the process, the more they will engage with somebody who's being negative. The more they will respond when you're not online. The more they will go say, oh, he already said this below, check it out. Or, oh, don't worry about that, it's coming. Or, oh, you might not know it, but Ed works. And so he's offline, but he comes on every night and answers questions. Like, don't say he's unresponsive. He's hyper-responsive, just not in this window of time. Like, the more you have that group, and any Kickstarter creator who's watching this video, who's been through any of this kind of community audience commentary stuff, knows that person, knows the person that had their back on that campaign. It's like, it's awesome. It's not usually tons. It's like 1, maybe 2. But even having one person who's not you, who's positive about you, is super valuable. And it has to be authentic, right? It's not just like, hey, friend, can you pretend you don't know me? And so being in the comments early and often and engaging and supportive is really important, especially when people have problems, concerns, or issues. That balance. I will just also add, you have to monitor those people and how they are communicating. If some of them are better than others, that's not the right word, but some of them are more prone to getting into nasty fights and others are more like positive, if you have somebody who's speaking on your behalf, but being negative, aggressive, you have to step in. You have to say, oh, okay, hey guys, don't worry about it. Yeah, what he's saying is right, but like, it's pretty straightforward. This is what the plan is or something. Like you don't continue. It's nice to have pit bulls, but like when like one pit bull in your community is attacking another pit bull in the community, like fringe to fringe is not helpful to you on your campaign. So if it's you want to chill everybody out. So like, it is sometimes the case that people who are positive for you move past cordial, move past appropriate, and like are just like insightful, not insight, like to incite, not violence, but like you don't want that, and you can't. I heard a great. I don't remember where this came up. But like, I want to say it was like the Joe Rogan Experience. I don't remember what it was, but it was just this little discussion where it was sort of like, if you are running a store and the mob is coming by and shaking you down and telling them you have to pay the money or they're going to like burn down your store, that's really terrible behavior. But then there's this vigilante who like beats the mob up and sort of you're like behind the register, not whatever, we're sort of rooting for the vigilante. But at the end of the day, it's still violent. like you want everyone in your community, everyone on your Kickstarter page to feel and believe that you are listening and care about what's going on. So like, just be careful. It's an interesting dynamic. So you're getting feedback. Another tip here is, at the very start of the project, create a spreadsheet online. I've never made this public to backers myself. I sort of have suggested that to other people, but like in a way I'm like, I don't know, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I find it is super valuable to say, hey, Susan, Frank, Joe, whatever, thank you for your feedback. Interesting ideas. Those are some cool stretch goals. Oh, maybe that is an interesting take on the design, or that might be a future core mechanic. You see, I have a running list of feedback. I'm going to add it to the list. It is so valuable, right? Because what's happening here? You're saying, hey person, I hear you. Thank you for the feedback. Let me do something with your feedback. I'm not saying I'm going to use it. I'm going to take it and review it. And as we regroup and consider it, we're going to look at it. In some ways, you're buying time. Like in some ways, like everything's always hottest when it happens. And so if you're getting a lot of feedback, like it'll go away in a couple of days. I guess that's another point. But like, I think having a spot to hear people and do an action. It's not just like, I hear you and then silent. It's like, and it's not everyone's satisfied, but if you're genuine, you're saying, thank you. I'm going to put it over here and I'm going to review this and look at it. And we're going to discuss it when we get to the next discussion point. I think that goes a really long way. So support the community, be engaged, have people who are sort of got your back, make sure they don't overdo it. Listen and respond to all feedback from folks. Use the FAQ system, right? Like as you're getting questions, make sure to put them into that space, into the the FAQ section. I think as you get people who are upset or nasty or just negative, you have to get that balance of like response, but not overdoing it, like not going down the hole. Again, thank you for the feedback. We'll think about it. Or it's been priced out in a certain sort of way. Reinforcing the reasons you do stuff, like, hey, why aren't you adding any more stretch goals? Hey, lots of people have been asking about stretch goals. The campaign has exceeded our expectations. All of our previous stretch goals were properly researched and investigated. We're doing some investigation. To some degree, and you got to be careful here, there's feedback during the campaign, and then the campaign ends, right? And so there is a little bit of a time box here. So there are some things that you'll want to think about that you're going to come back to, but you have a feeling you know the answer. there is some space to come back to it, like, hey, thank you for the feedback. We'll look into it. It's going to take some time to get in touch with all of our partners. That might be something you end up swinging back towards the end of the campaign, and then backing, saying you can't do it or whatever, if that's the result. I think another important thing, and this is sort of a litany and not terribly well organized, but another important thing is there is that loud, vocal people who are upset. Sometimes people can get upset together and build up on that upsetness. But in reality, assuming you don't do something stupid and get into a fight that takes a little commentary discussion about somebody who wants bigger meeples, or like somebody who wants a thing you just don't want to do, like who is complaining about why don't you do this stretch goal for that, or whatever reason. As long as you don't turn that into some big escalated fight that then spreads out of control off your page, which it will, and you can sort of keep it in control there, it's a small group of people. Like, by and large, the vast majority of people who back your game want to back it, want to copy, and don't even look at the comments. There's a subset that does, and then even within that, there's only so many people who are doing that. Like, boy, if you don't XYZ, you're going to lose me as a backer. Another life lesson: those backers who are like somebody who's difficult at point A tends to be difficult at point A, B, C, D. So I know like James Matthey, who is the first video where I've brought him up since he passed away specifically. But so may he rest in peace. I miss James. But setting that aside, what he would always say, like, I don't like. I'd rather not have that person. Like, that person is going to give me a headache from day one to day. So like, if you don't want to back the game, don't back the game. I would avoid that tact directly, but so rather than expressing it, just know it. It's like, oh, at the end of the day, if this guy, it's one dude or two dudes or three dudes. It's the interactions that escalate these things out of control. If you handle them calmly and you're responsive, usually it doesn't. So that's absolutely something to keep in mind. Also, and I hate to sort of be recommending certain tactics. News of today is not the news of tomorrow, and distraction tactics can work, right? So if you have somebody bringing up some issue and you sort of address it, but it's not going away, like, release a new stretch goal, do an update, have a survey, like introduce a new topic or a new discussion point or new something into the stream. It's not going to change that there was this conversation, but it can bury it a little bit and it can move it. And again, it's not about, you will never, if somebody's pissed at you, they will never go away. Like, the idea that you can distract them is like, they will be there. You do not have enough people in a Kickstarter that like an angry person can just be like in a wave of like you will always have that. But there's a general case where things just sort of move on and you're talking about new things. I think it's okay to also reach out to people directly. You can ask somebody to PM you offline. I think that's an okay place to have a discussion to get some more information. So the banter of the back and forth isn't in the middle of the stream. But don't ever think that conversation that is off stream isn't then going to be back in the middle. Like, it's not about pretending it's a hidden room of like a private discussion. It's more like, hey, I think we can like have a back and forth, and I don't want to keep, if I don't have the back and forth on the main page, it's not going to keep procking the content. But you still want to work to resolving it. It's always good to ask people for their opinions, but expect you're going to get them. Voting has its own issues. And, polls and understanding player expectation is, as your audiences grow, you've got people who want different things. People relate to your products in different ways, and their expectations are different. If anything, again, you having a center, you as an individual knowing what you want, knowing where you're willing to do something new or different, and where you're like, no, this is what I want, goes a long way. Knowing what you want. This is your Kickstarter. This is your dream. You are engaging with backers that get support from them, and that's really important. But having a sense of where your lines are and what you are and are not comfortable, I think, is really important. I think having that spreadsheet works, explaining yourself, communicating, all those things go a long way. And what also goes a long way is where you can bend, where you can accommodate, where you can take things into consideration. You do. And, there are certain sub-communities to be aware. Not even like in the board game, there's sleevers. There are people who are really sensitive on sleeving and being able to sleeve, and that's something to keep in mind. There are people who are very sensitive to color blind and color issues. There are people who are really sensitive to box size. There's all other sorts of community and audiences you have to keep in mind. But there is this very board game genre specific component groups. If you're doing an expansion, will it fit? There are these categories of folks that ask this every time because they are active parts of the community who back a lot of projects, and they're disappointed sometimes or excited sometimes, right? And so you absolutely can know your answer to all those questions. You shouldn't be surprised if you have cards in your game and you're doing an insert, and if you are using cards, let me tell you, somebody in your campaign will want to know about sleeves. Without a doubt. And you just need to know that. Now you do. No more excuses. So anyway, I think I went through a bunch of examples. I probably could rattle along even longer, but only so much energy. Hopefully this was helpful in thinking about it. And again, at the end of the day, be authentic, be yourself, be respectful, be kind. And I do think you should make sure that you're behaving well and other people are behaving well, both whether they're agreeing with you or disagreeing with you. I think it's pretty important, especially when it's condensed. Everybody on the internet likes a show, right? Everybody wants to see drama. And some of that's good attention, maybe, perhaps. Some of it's not good attention, right? So you'll figure that out. Cool. Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.